Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and to talk about masculinity and men's rights and issues. I'm your host, Brian Crawl, and today we are going to be talking about facts and statistics that I think you will find as significant as I do. These are all going to be sourced from menarehuman.com, and the page on it is called the Men's Rights Citation List. So all of these are factual. They are based upon studies and statistics and other such things that you can find cited here at menarehuman.com/citations. The link is also posted below. I'm not going to be going over all of the data from the page. I'm just going to be going over some highlights, so I do encourage you to go there yourself to look over the rest. First, let's start with crime in the justice system and the bias in the courts and police. Men are convicted twice as often as women and get 63% harsher sentences for the same exact crimes. In fact, one man recently made me aware of a case where a couple was tried together for having committed the same crime together as partners in crime, and the man received far worse of a sentence than the woman, even though they were being tried for the exact same thing. Women have been given leniency in sentencing and conviction for over 200 years, so this is not actually something that is new. Studies have shown, linked again on this site, that crime is seen as more excusable when a woman does it, and men are judged more harshly for the same exact actions. 96% of people shot by the police are men. And there's some interesting articles and examples here. One article says that battered woman syndrome is just a get out of jail free card for women who kill their partners in cold blood. And something unique to female predators, they can always claim that their male victims abused them regardless of the victim's age and have a reasonable chance of being believed. One article says that court says pedophilia does not apply when the perpetrator is a woman. Something we've seen a lot in recent years, where there has been a huge number of female sex offenders, oftentimes female teachers targeting male students who are minors, and they are never referred to in the news or the courts as having committed sexual assault, having committed rape, being pedophiles, rapists, etc. They're always said to have had a sexual relationship. So it seems that these crimes are viewed differently when they are done by women. I wonder why that is. We'll get there in a little while. But now let's move on to domestic violence. And first we're going to address the concealment of evidence. And it says here that this section intends to prove that ideologues have biased the police against men and spent decades trying to hide and silence all conversation on male victims of domestic violence. We have a number of articles here talking about how there's actually been fraud in the ways in which feminists have shown men to be the primary perpetrators of domestic violence. There's this thing called the Duluth model that the courts use, which basically shows all of the ways that men use to oppress and abuse women. And it says here that there is fraud in the domestic violence statistics and the Duluth model, that there's been 40 years of lies about domestic violence. There's a feminist scholarly paper that actually admits feminist concealment of facts relating to women perpetrating domestic violence. And there's just a number of articles here that I would highly recommend you check out if you're interested in getting to the truth of domestic violence. But let's move on now to the topic of murder and death. It says here that 50% of all abuse victims who die are boys. More men than women die as a result of domestic violence. In 2018, roughly half of all people killed by a family member in Australia were male. 71% of children killed by just one of their parents were killed by their mothers. And 60% of victims of abuse are boys, not girls. 57% of all abuse victims who die are boys. Murders of men are rarely pursued by police when compared with murders of women. So basically, when police officers have, the different murder cases on their desk to pursue, they favor and prioritize the murders of females over males. And remember when I said earlier that women who commit murder of a man will often claim that he abused them? Well, it says here, women who killed husbands rarely gave a warning, and most weren't actually abused. Barely a quarter of husband killers are victims of domestic abuse, and less than half suffer from any identified psychological problems, and fewer still have had trouble with the police. So basically what this means is that most women who kill their husbands do so without any real good reason or justification or motive. It basically comes out of the blue. Now, feminists may say that, well, women die more from domestic violence, but suicide can be attributed to domestic violence incidents. When domestic violence-related suicides are combined with domestic violence homicides, the total number of domestic violence-related deaths are higher for males than females. So many women abuse their men so much that they drive the men to suicide. And when you take those deaths into account, more men die from domestic violence. And it's also well known that wives tend to murder either by proxy, meaning they get a lover, a male friend, or relative, or a hired hitman, or do so by subterfuge, classically by disguised as a poisoning or accident. And so basically the statistics often get skewed here because of this. So for instance, when a mob boss orders a hit on someone and has a hitman take out that hit, well, that mob boss is still the one who is responsible for that murder. But when there is a female who has her husband killed by someone else, she does not get accounted for as, part of the statistics of female murderers. So the subterfuge is often successful, but even when detected, the third-party cases are recorded either as being both perpetrated and instigated by the third-party male. And women are more likely to kill when they are motivated by gain. Homicide of a male partner is not always motivated by a history of domestic abuse, and females are more likely than males to hire contract killers. But now let's circle back to abuse. Nearly 40%, 39.4 to be exact, of total victims are male-treated by a mother acting alone, and 21.5% of victims are male-treated by a father acting alone. And studies have shown that violence towards women by men goes directly against their biological programming and is not a result of some sort of inherent toxic masculinity or anything like that. Men who abuse or kill women are likely to be mentally divergent, and those who aren't are not engaging in Duluth model style power and control oppression tactics. Instead, they are displacing their male intrasexual aggression. Washington Times surmised the domestic violence situation against men, and 200 studies showed that the violence is 50-50. Harvard shows that 70% of domestic violence is actually committed by women against men. And when it comes to teen dating, boys report being victims of violence more than women. And there's a reference to a huge meta-study here, which is a compilation of many studies demonstrating that women are just as violent as men, or even more so. The United Kingdom cases of domestic abuse by females are increasing at twice the rate of men's abuse. Women are more likely to control partners with physical abuse. And in one study, the majority of men in the sample reported experiencing controlling behavior from their female partner. And this includes behavior that is often reported from women of their male partners. The same types of behaviors that are spoken of in the Duluth model that is supposed to only be perpetrated by men against women. But many men didn't feel they could ask for help or support. Imagine that. Those who did appeal for support says that services were more geared towards helping women and felt they weren't taken seriously. Gee, that isn't surprising at all. In fact, that's been my experience too. And there's actually more references here to information on help-seeking support and public reactions. However, I'm going to move on since there's just so much. I want to talk about false accusation stats and statistics. The true figure of false accusations, once you add in men who are exonerated, is about 25 to 26%. In other words, 1 in 4 of the accusations that women make against men is false. Now, 88% of child abuse allegations lodged in family court are fake, and at least 20% are malicious. Malicious complaints are deemed roughly twice as common as real ones, and none of the women making malicious accusations were ever prosecuted. And this has been going on for 30 years. False abuse claims by mothers are the new weapon of choice in court, a retired judge says, or retiring. False reports happen. They are, for lack of a better word, common. And one old study showed that nearly 1 in 10 people have been falsely accused of a crime, 60% of whom are men. And another old study found that about half of all rape accusations are actually false. And I would actually bet money that that number has gone up in recent years since the rise of the Me Too movement and the whole rape culture propaganda and such, and all of this believe all women nonsense. And the claim from feminists is that only 2 to 8% of rape accusations are false, which is a misleading figure. But of course, the issue of false rape accusations is going to be different depending on the culture you are in. And in India, where I have spent time, it is a very bad problem. I was actually told about this by the Indian male friends that I made there. And luckily, there is a citation here. There is a bizarre Indian law that states that a man is retroactively considered a rapist if he has fully consensual sex with a woman, but then refuses to marry her. So it's called rape on false promise of marriage, and it makes up over half of all of the rapes of women in India. And men realized this in India and stopped promising to marry girlfriends because that became such a big problem. And what my Indian friends told me while I was there was that when there is an unmarried couple who has sex and then breaks up, the female would often accuse the male of rape. And so the Indian government had to literally write in to the law that having sex with a boyfriend is not rape, so that they could stop all of these false accusations. Now, there's this thing called lynching, which still goes on in some cultures. And men are often lynched because of false accusations. And sometimes lynching victims are cleared of rape. 100 years later, there's a lynching victim that was cleared of rape 100 years later. This is bad. The false rape accusations are a very terrible weapon that women use against men. And even though lynchings aren't common in modern Western civilization anymore, a man who gets accused of rape and goes to jail for it gets raped in jail, which is just as bad as being lynched, if not worse. I don't know. I think I would rather just be hung and die than have to be raped repeatedly in jail for something I didn't do.
If you're enjoying listening to what I have to say, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you feel I'm adding value to your life, you can also tip me at the PayPal link below in proportion to the amount of value added. Your support will help me be able to continue this work because the oppressive fascists at YouTube are against this kind of content and actively trying to suppress it. So it is only with the help of viewers like you that I'll be able to keep fighting the good fight against the evil fucking matriarch.
The Rosewood race massacre, which caused the black town of Rosewood to be utterly destroyed in a riot and have a death toll as high as 150, was started by accusations that a white girl was raped by a black man. So you can see what a tremendous weapon the false accusations are. But now let's circle back to the topic of murder. Children are most often killed by their mothers, not their fathers. To be exact, the statistics of parents committing what is called filicide, the killing of their child, 67% is done by the mother and only 33% by the father. When it comes to the murder of adults, female serial killers tend to work in caring professions such as nursing and use methods that make them hard to catch, such as poisoning and other subtle means. So female killers are oftentimes very underestimated. There's a lot more of them than we think. They are oftentimes better at getting away with it, and they're oftentimes people you would least expect, people who are supposed to be caring for their victims. Now, interestingly, when it comes to male violence, it says here that testosterone alone does not cause violence. It only pushes men to be more socially dominant. So men are not inherently violent just because they are more dominant due to testosterone. But now let's talk more about sex crimes that are not rape. First, sperm jacking, the stealing of a man's sperm in order to get pregnant without his consent. It forces men to father children unwillingly and unknowingly, and is very common, much more common than anyone thinks, and is not illegal. It should be considered a sex crime because if a man were to do it to a woman, it would be. It would be considered a sexual offense if a man and woman agreed to have sex with a condom and the man took the condom off without the woman's knowledge, or just went ahead and started fucking her without it. But when it happens the other way around, it is not a crime at all, and the man is still due child support to the woman. There is also a large problem of forced marriage of men. A UN study on child grooms estimates that there are 115 million worldwide. That's like a huge fraction of the population of the United States, like almost half. And, from time to time, I hear about the problem of child brides, but I didn't even know until now that child grooms are apparently just as much of a problem. So why aren't all of the news articles on child brides out there including child grooms and about both genders? I wonder. Men are even abducted and forced to marry in India. Why are we not hearing about this? When it comes to revenge porn, apparently most revenge porn attacks are carried out by women. And men and women are equally likely to be victims of revenge porn attacks. So why have we only heard about this being a problem, by men on women? Apparently 90% of male revenge porn victims are also blackmailed with the revenge porn, but the police just don't care. So that's why we don't hear about it. When it comes to sexual assault and harassment, men wearing kilts in Scotland are routinely molested by women. Routinely. And women in power also sexually harass people. But we only hear about the problem of the big evil patriarchal men who use their power to sexually harass women, even though it is also still a problem the other way around. And there's also a whole list of citations here, a pretty long one, on the rape and sexual assault of males. It's really too much for me to go over. And I really have to wrap this up, so I would urge you to check out the link here below, menarehuman.com/citations. Before ending, I want to conclude by going over the empathy gap and gamma bias. The empathy gap is basically, the inequality in how society empathizes with the genders, how females are empathized with and men are not very much. And there's also the gamma bias. The gamma bias is something I'm going to do a whole video on, but just to sum it up, it is basically a double standard. It's where you put certain things under a microscope, right, and amplify them and sort of ignore or minimize other things. So that's why when I said, we hear a lot more about these things that happen to women and we don't hear about the ones that happen to men. All right, so you highlight female victimhood and ignore male victimhood. All right, so this empathy gap and gamma bias is what menarehuman.com says is the direct root of most male issues. Okay. And there's some interesting citations here. It says men are more likely to be sacrificed for the benefit of others than women, which is why most of the people in the military and the police force are men, firemen, all these men who are sacrificing their lives for the greater good and for other people, to save other people. It's not women doing it, it's men. A study with millions of participants covering 233 countries finds people would much rather you run over and kill a young man than a woman. Men are seen as more expendable, and the preference even extends to children. All right, people preferring to kill young boys rather than young girls. Women are nearly 5 times more likely to show an automatic preference for their own gender than men are, and men actually have a strong bias towards women. All right, so women are supporting each other more, and men are supporting women more than they are supporting men. The media obsession with female victims has led to academics dubbing the phrase missing white woman syndrome. Now, here's an interesting citation. Misogyny has no scientific basis of any kind. The evidence is of bias towards women, known as phylogeny. The empathy gap is very severe in medical professions dealing with sex. Male sexuality is demonized way more than female sexuality, and this extends to paraphilias, meaning sexual offenders such as pedophiles and sexual deviants and people who have, sexual illnesses. Okay, so these are seen as dangerous in men way more frequently than in women, as we all know. And male medical professionals show no solidarity towards men, but demonstrate gynocentric attitudes, whereas female practitioners exhibit solidarity towards women and no special sympathy towards men. This is interesting because I think about a time that I was in the hospital getting surgery and how the female nurse attending to me was actually a real bitch to me. She showed no sympathy whatsoever, even though I was in excruciating pain. All right. I don't want to tell you what the surgery was because it's really gross. It was taking place on one of the most sensitive areas of my body. And, so while I'm waiting for the surgery to take place, I'm basically like writhing in pain. And the female nurse is acting annoyed and disdainful towards me. It was interesting, too, because there was this thuggish looking woman. She had this sort of ghetto, fabulous thing going on, and she was actually getting put off, I think, by the female nurse's behavior, and was like looking at me with concern, like, why is this female nurse treating this man in pain like this? I just remember, looking at her, seeing the look of concern, and then looking at the nurse's face and seeing her look of almost like anger towards me. White women are favored in the rental market over men, especially minority men. You want to talk about male privilege? Well, here's a reason why there's more homeless men than women, because women get favored on rental applications, specifically the white women. And here's an interesting citation. The lack of preferential treatment for women is generally seen as bigotry against them. So that explains why when feminists talk about equality, they don't really seem to mean equality. They seem to mean, empowerment, having more rights and privileges and freedoms. while having less responsibilities. And they're constantly talking about male privilege, even though they're obviously getting more privilege in society because they view a lack of preferential treatment as being bigoted against them. And when it comes to positive and negative feedback, women are given more positive feedback and men are given more negative feedback. And this is something that I've actually experienced and tested myself with my last girlfriend, who I had a business relationship with. We used to make the same exact posts on our social media profiles across all platforms, and she would get more positive feedback for them and I would get more negative feedback. She basically didn't get any negative feedback, and I basically hardly got any positive feedback. And I'm not alone in this. A year or two ago, I met a female social scientist of some sort, some sort of researcher in Scandinavia and Sweden or something, and she had a male partner who she would do the same exact thing with and showed the same exact results. When they made the same social media posts, she got positive reinforcement, he got negative reinforcement. I wonder why that is. Could it be that this empathy gap is real? And that men are not privileged and women are? I guess so, because there's more. When men and women are abusing each other in public, there are very different reactions. Numerous social experiments have shown this. You've probably seen them. When a man is yelling at a woman in public, sort of verbally abusing her, being aggressive with her, but not even physically touching her, right? Maybe just getting close. People come to her aid. However, when a female is doing much more to a male in public and is not just yelling at him, but is physically assaulting and abusing him, people laugh at him. All right? Another study shows that when men treat women the same way that women treat men, it is seen as sexist. And this is interesting too, because when I talk to women the same way that they talk to me, they accuse me of being sexist. And a global study suggests that men actually face more discrimination than women. And there's this book called Gender Inclusive, Essays on Violence, Men and Feminist International Relations by Professor Adam Jones, which is apparently a study of how genocides specifically target men and boys, not women. However, apparently that book has become very hard to find, probably because it's been banned by feminists. But Professor Adam Jones also wrote another book on the same issues, Gendercide and Genocide, so you can try to find both of those. And he's not the only one doing good work like this. Professor Warren Farrell explains the empathy gap, and he's written many books on it, specifically The Myth of Male Power, which I recommend you looking up. And here's a very interesting study on empathy and conformity on each gender. In 1972, women in an experiment were more likely than men to obey an authority figure telling them to torture puppies. 54% of men were willing to give the puppy the maximum allowable shock, while 100% of the female participants did it. So how is it then that men are the more evil and toxic ones then? I guess they probably really aren't. And as I said, this list goes on. I've got to wrap this up, but it goes over how, men commit suicide more than women. Men are homeless more than women. Male gender mutilation, also known as circumcision, is common, whereas female gender mutilation is seen as an atrocious human rights violation. There is plenty of sources and resources cited here, lots of great studies and other articles and data for you to look through. So again, menarhuman.com/citations. Check that out. This is information that everyone should have, because feminism and women in general have completely and purposely skewed this data. They have fraudulently covered up, misinterpreted, and changed the data out there to make it look different in ways that favor women. Again, there's this gamma bias, right, where male victimization gets minimized, female victimization gets maximized, male good gets minimized, female good gets maximized, right? So make sure you have your facts correct. Check out all of the data and the statistics and other resources and studies there below. It is linked in the description.
That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button. And if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix and the matriarchy controlling it and learn everything you need to know about female on male sexism, get your copy of my newly released book called Misandry Exposed, on sale now for a special price that won't last long. So check it out by clicking the link below. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.